Hey everyone, Jesse McCarthy here. Is your kid a mess? Like maybe a bit disorganized? Now, I've experienced quite a few children who have such organizational problems. And today I'm going to talk about one of them, a unique student who taught me a little about organization, but really about something much deeper. So I was a teacher in my early 20s. It's a relatively traditional school, and I was tutoring this young girl whom I'll call Rachel for privacy. So she was very bright. I'd say brilliant in many ways, but also very disorganized. For instance, at age 12, she would write these college-level essays and then lose the memory stick where the work was saved. At 13, she would argue both sides of an historical debate, masterfully. And then after, when we'd all go outside for break, she wouldn't be able to eat her lunch because, she forgot where she put it. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Now, when Rachel and I met for our brief daily, what I would call organizational tutoring, I tried everything to change these destructive habits of hers. We had sticky notes, we had planners, we had some parent conferences, we had endless discussions. We had everything, yet nothing ever really worked. That's until one afternoon. So school had just ended, and Rachel was trudging her way down these steps to our tutoring session. I can just so vividly see it now, like I'm looking out the window on her way down. But her backpack is like slightly open and just dangling off her shoulder, like ready to fall at any moment. And then, I kind of lost track of her because she must have went around the building. But the next thing I know, the door to the tutoring room swings open. Wildly swings open. And there she is, just disheveled, and books literally falling out of her hands. So she glances around the room and just tosses this mess of a backpack down on the floor. And with a dejected look on her face, but mixed with a strange kind of triumph, she says, "I don't know why we even have to do this." And that's the moment when something really hit me. So Rachel had said, "we." I don't know why we even have to do this. So it was in that instant where the kind of error in how I had been approaching things just became crystal clear to me. So at her age, and she was an early teenager, so this is at the stage of development where one just genuinely craves and needs a strong sense of independence, of just self-direction. So at that stage, this young girl had never truly owned her own challenges with organization. I had been the driving force in her attempted improvement. Yet she had never even chosen to begin that process, let alone to direct it herself. So after a few moments of me being like that kind of frozen deer in the headlights, thinking to myself, oh boy, okay, so what do I do now? This is going on inside of my head. I looked at Rachel and I said this just sincerely. I told her, you don't have to come to tutoring anymore. Like if it's the case that you find in the future you want to work on organization or on anything else really, let me know. And if I think I can help, we'll plan a schedule that makes sense for both of us and start it up. And then I just said goodbye. That was it. Now, I don't recall whether it was a couple days or a couple weeks later, but not long after that kind of difficult afternoon, we began our tutoring back up. But this time, though, Rachel initiated the sessions, and Rachel chose the schedule. Like how many days a week we'd meet and for how long, that kind of thing. And wild enough, after a few months, I'd say, of like real work with, to be expected hiccup here and there, Rachel got herself organized. And proudly, glowingly organized. And then shortly after that, her organizational tutoring, it ended because she no longer needed it. So what a lesson that whole experience was for me. When I began teaching years ago, like back in the day, I had this view, somewhat arrogant actually, that I can change any child. Now, over time though, and this is through working with, at that time it was by hundreds of students, but since, thousands, I came to see that such a view is more fittingly put as any child can change himself or herself. Now, this is a subtle shift in phrasing, but I think is a fundamental distinction in education, or it could be in parenting, or in just general mindset. Now, this self-directed approach doesn't mean that the teacher or the parent is unnecessary and then it's kind of a free-for-all where anything goes. It's actually the opposite. Like a thoughtful guide, create a deliberate, purposeful environment where a child can thrive, can really flourish. But that's ultimately only through the child's own will, like her own choice. And that's as Rachel taught me back then. I mean, basically, she made real for me something deep, that growth is impossible to achieve for another human being. Or as Maria Montessori once put it, the fundamental basis of education must always remain that one must act for oneself. Now, I think many teachers and parents just never get this point. And maybe understandably, as many of us grew up in an educational system where we ourselves were taught at, and that's whether or not we had any interest or say in the supposed teaching. So for me, I'm just grateful I had Rachel in my life. Like, she taught me something so true. And it's that no one can force another human being to change. It just doesn't happen. And I'd go further. I'd say that any attempt we make to change a person, that's a child or adult, your friend or a family member, that attempt is probably a sign that we have some changing to do of our own. At least that was definitely the case for me back then. All right, that's it. That's what I have for you today. Now, if what I've said was at all helpful or made good sense to you, let me know. Write me over at montessorieducation.com. And again, I'm Jesse McCarthy. And if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast where you're listening, go for it. It's cool to have new subscribers. And with that, my best to everyone out there, and talk again soon. Adios.